Let me take you back to a quiet evening in Tampa, Florida. The kind of night that feels ordinary, predictable. The kind of night where nothing seems out of place, until, suddenly, everything is. Because on January 17, 2024, that calm was shattered by violence. And a name that would soon appear in headlines. Michael Monroe Banks, 42 years old. Now, here's the thing, stories like this don't begin with the crime. They begin long before that moment, in the routines, the relationships, and the unseen tensions that slowly build beneath the surface. From what investigators would later piece together, Michael Monroe Banks was not a stranger to hardship. Like many people, he carried a past shaped by choices, circumstances, and struggles that don't always make headlines. But on that night something changed. The victim, whose life became the center of this tragedy, was someone known within their community. A person with routines, connections, and people who cared deeply about them. And that's important to remember. Because behind every case file is a real human life, not just a headline. As the evening unfolded, nothing initially seemed unusual. Tampa moved at its usual pace. Traffic lights changing, people heading home, others just starting their night. But somewhere within that city, a situation was escalating. Witnesses would later describe moments of confusion. Raised voices, the tension that felt sudden but intense. And then gunfire, not prolonged, not chaotic in the way movies portray. Just a series of sharp, unmistakable sounds that instantly changed everything. Emergency services were called. First responders arrived quickly, moving with urgency. But also with that quiet professionalism that comes from experience. They secured the scene, assessed the situation, and began the process that follows every violent incident. Preserving evidence, documenting details, and trying to understand what had just happened. The victim was found with critical injuries, despite efforts to help. The reality of the situation became clear. A life had been taken, and for the people who knew them. That moment would divide time into before and after. As for Michael Monroe Banks, he didn't disappear into the shadows. Law enforcement quickly identified him as a key figure in the incident. Whether through witness accounts, surveillance, or prior connections, the investigation moved with focus. Here's where things often shift in cases like this. What seems sudden to the outside world is rarely without context. Investigators began digging into the relationship between Banks and the victim. Looking for motive, history, anything that could explain how things escalated to violence. And piece by piece, a clearer picture began to form. Authorities worked methodically. Interviews were conducted, timelines were built. Every detail, no matter how small, was examined. Because in cases like this, the truth isn't found in one big revelation. It's built from dozens of small, consistent facts that all point in the same direction. Banks was eventually taken into custody, and with that, the focus turned from what happened to why it happened. Court proceedings would follow, where evidence, testimony, and legal arguments would attempt to answer the questions left behind. Not just for the sake of justice, but for the sake of clarity. Because when something like this happens, people want to understand. They need to, but understanding doesn't always bring comfort. Because at the center of it all is loss, a life that won't continue, conversations that will never happen again, a future that was suddenly and permanently altered. And for the victim's loved ones, justice, no matter how it's defined in court, can never fully replace what was taken. That's the part that often gets overlooked. We hear about arrests, charges, trials, outcomes, but we don't always sit with the aftermath. The quiet, ongoing reality for those left behind. So as we look back on January 17, 2024, it's not just about the incident itself, it's about the ripple effect. The way one moment can impact so many lives in ways that aren't always visible. And maybe that's the most important thing to take from this. Not just what happened, but what it means. Because behind every true crime story, there's a human story. One that deserves to be remembered with respect, not reduced to just another case. And in this case, that means remembering the victim. Not for how their life ended, but for the fact that it mattered in the first place. And that it still does.